Welcome back to another episode of Soul Driven with Steph. I am thrilled about today's guest. She is a friend, fellow sister circle member, and I get to have her on my birth team. So please welcome to the podcast, Ellyn Halley.
Hi, Steph. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yes. Yeah, let's hear a little bit about your backstory because I think we tend to think that we started on the path that we're on right now, and that's typically not the case. So tell us kind of your backstory, how you got into what you do now.
Yeah, I was thinking about this it's kind of been a long, winding road in some ways to get here for me. I when I was younger, I always knew probably be in something like kind of medical, like healthcare ish. I thought I was going to be a vet for a long time because I'm a big animal lover. Rode horses growing up, and then um, settled on like biomedical engineering. Originally went to UW-Madison for that, and then ended up transferring to UW-La Crosse where I graduated my undergrad degree in. And it was throughout more undergrad where I actually fractured my spine when I was in high school. Saw a chiropractor for that. Felt really well supported by the chiropractor, but not necessarily like the medical team that I was seeing for that, and then really injured my back again in college. Saw the same chiropractor, like went home to like see her, and same kind of thing. Was always really interested by like the chiropractic side of like healthcare. So obviously switched from engineering to exercise science, which is what my bachelor's degree is. Did the pre-medical route because I was like, okay, I'll either go PT, chiro, or like DO, doctor of osteopathic, which is very similar to like an MD. And really just loved the scope of chiropractic. We have a really broad scope, which a lot of people don't realize. So we can do things with exercise and rehabilitation. We can do that like traditional hands-on care. We can order blood work, we can order x-rays and MRIs. Like we have this very, very broad general scope of practice. So I really liked that side of things originally when I went to chiropractic school. I was like, I don't really want to like adjust people. I don't really want to crack people's backs. Like I want to do more like functional health and functional medicine. Um, but I also had this like very deep interest in women's health. I had a lot of like struggles of my own growing up. I took a medical anthropology class at UWL with her name was Dr. Christine Hippert. She was amazing, and she spoke about her birth experience, which was very, very interesting. She talked about like women's healthcare in like the conventional sense, and she actually did her master's thesis on like alternative healthcare. So she was a very big like factor in I think where I am now, just like her being like the first person to ever talk openly about home birth, like in my life.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah. Yeah, I went to chiropractic school, did my doula training while I was in chiropractic school, and just have like full gone into women's health and pelvic health. There's just such a big need for those, and it's very exciting now. I feel like there's a lot more people in this space, which is a good thing. Um, but yeah, that's I guess kind of how I ended up where I am now.
Yeah, I love that this space has become more mainstream, I guess you could say, versus just the traditional medical model. And I think there is such a need for so much more education and support, which is probably what piqued your interest in the first place was, wow, people are having home births in 2024. Like, why? What is up with that? So we'll dig a little bit more into what that looks like. So, where you're at in your career right now, you have your own business and practice. Tell us maybe that transition point from being a chiropractor into doing more doula work and supporting women's health in the way that you do now. What did that look like? And how did you make that transition and what kind of inspired it?
Yeah. Like I said, like when I went into chiropractic school, like didn't really think that I would be like your traditional average chiropractor at all. And I did my doula training during school, partly because I attended my sister's birth for her first child, and I had learned a lot, but I wasn't a doula at the time. And then her birth was actually very traumatic for her, right? But I was like there, but also not really sure what to do. And I had learned, a lot up to that point with like women's health and like chiropractic, but also like just knew there had to be like a different way for people. That combined with meeting Erica Boland, like she was a doula and a chiropractor, and just seeing how she was operating in this space just really kind of led me to where I am now. And obviously, I work for them out of school, which was an amazing experience. I learned a ton, but I also just felt like there was something missing for me. Like, I loved my patients, I loved working there, but I knew that I wanted to get away from like traditional hands-on care, which they're still, I wouldn't say like traditional, they're very like movement forward too. But I wanted to combine like my passion for like exercise science and rehabilitation with my knowledge on like women's health and the birth space and pelvic health into like one container. And so that's really what inspired my own business. Is now I'm actually almost 100% online, doing pelvic health rehabilitation, doing women's health and like fitness, which has been awesome, and nutrition, which is really cool that I could just combine everything. And then I still do some in person birth work as well. And so it's been a really fun, I guess, journey to here. I've been in my own business on my own for about 5 months now, and started my own business almost a year ago, like officially. So it's been a lot of learning experiences, but it's just been really amazing to just combine all my skill sets, because I think you look at them and you're kind of like, I don't know how these all go together, but then they really do, right? A lot of women need the support from the exercise standpoint, but they also need really good birth education and postpartum. One of my favorite populations to work with is return to exercise and activity and postpartum, because there's such a pelvic health component there too. But it's also like your birth experience and honoring all those things too.
Yeah, and I think it's such a unique time in a woman's life, and there needs to be that education and support, especially when it's their first and they don't really know what to expect, and you're just trying to, do all the right things, and being able to support them from maybe even like before they get pregnant to entire pregnancy, the birth, and then after that too. Like, it doesn't just end at the birth, it's the whole postpartum return to exercise, and or maybe then you're going into your next birth, so it's like being able to support them through all the different stages and journeys of their life and their kind of child rearing experience. And I feel like there's a lot of noise in the healthcare industry about what is right and wrong, especially during pregnancy, which we've kind of discussed, just in conversation. So tell us about how your approach to health and wellness and pregnancy is unique and effective.
Yeah, I think I have such an interesting perspective, right? With like, I think people make an assumption about chiropractors that we're like all alternative, like majority, like askew, like conventional healthcare. And that's really not like true for me. I'm such like a middly person, because I think there's like beautiful things from both sides. And like as a doula, especially, and even as a healthcare provider, we should be, I think, like majority like neutral on things, and like let our clients, our patients, like make the best decision for them. Which is a big role of a doula, is like we should be unbiased. We should be able to like present both sides of things, and this helps people like cut out the noise too, when they can like trust what you're saying, that you're not just trying to like push them in towards your bias.
Yeah.
When they can be like, oh, like I trust them because, I look at, okay, what is a little more like conventional healthcare, offering, what do they offer, and like, alternative, which again is not like my favorite term to use here either, but it's pretty well accepted. But just like, what are both sides saying, and then kind of like seeing what the middle is, and then letting people make a decision for themselves, is really important. I get things from like evidence-based birth and things like that that are maybe a little more like conventional, more like midwives in that system. But there's also like leaning on the really wonderful home birth community we have here, and herbalism and different things, and then just being like, okay, like this is the situation. Here's what one side would probably say about it. Here's what the other, and like where can we meet in the middle? Like what sounds best for you and your preferences and what you know about yourself. This is
Yeah.
important.
Absolutely. And I love that you have such a like deep love of like the science background and the research. And even through my own lens of like when I was teaching group fitness and yoga classes, like I really tried to lean more on that versus just like, this is a traditional yoga pose and this is how it's always been done. So we still do it this way. And trying to actually get into the science of it and then educating people on how to make the decision that's best for them, because there is no one right option or one right choice. And I think what you said about a doula being neutral essentially is really important because, yeah, you're not trying to sway into your own personal bias, but really just educating so that they feel empowered to make the right decision for them. And I even feel like when Ben, my husband, and I attended your workshop with Megan, your birth prep workshop, I felt like it was very unbiased. And, we were the only couple there that wasn't doing a traditional medical birth. And I didn't walk away feeling like, I felt really good about my decision because I was a little overwhelmed with a lot of the medical interventions that we talked about. But I was like, they're still good to understand and know because if I do have to go to the hospital, I want to know what my options are. So I think really just getting down to like educating on the options so that people can make their own choice and not just feeling like you have to do whatever the doctor says or whatever the person tells you to do. Like, I think that is what's so fascinating to me. And I'd love your take on this. Do you see like a stronger movement for women like advocating for themselves in birth than we've maybe seen in the past because they're becoming more educated on their options?
Yeah, 100%. I think social media has like so many downsides, but also has a lot of upsides. There's just so much information and there's so much education, like so easily available, which has its pros and cons. But I
Yeah.
think, especially in the like pelvic health space and the birth space, people like know, oh, I have options. Like I can choose an out of hospital birth, but I could also do some visits at the hospital if I wanted. Oh, I can choose a hospital birth, but I could also like do postpartum with a local midwife if I wanted. Like there's just so many options out there. And even, I will say like birth will be what birth will be. Like we do all the things, we like do all the prep. We do all the right things that we can. And then sometimes things just like happen that are out of our control and we maybe have to like, enter into a space that we didn't want to initially, but like this is what the safest option is now. And so knowing that you have options is so important because a lot, I think the team, like the midwife team at Gunderson is really, really amazing. And there's a lot of other provider teams that are doing amazing things for like letting women have choices and like letting them know their options. But there's providers that are just like, this is the way, like this is the only way, and this is what you're going to do. And that's really unfortunate. And you can definitely have respectful conversations. And if you don't have that background knowledge, right, you can't bring up those things. It's like I was at a birth a couple of times now where they're like, well, we could start Pitocin or we could like break your water. And I'm like, well, what if we try I'm like, is it okay if I propose like another option? Like, oh yeah. And like, what if we try like having her pump first, you know, because this client wanted a less intervention focused birth. So it's like finding those ways. And like, it's also good for the providers. Like they might not have that option come top of mind either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, like you said, you could have a doula in a traditional medical birth and they can still help you advocate and or know your options so that in those moments where you're probably not making clear decisions, you have, birth plan ready to go. And I think it's such a good positive change. Even having conversations with people my mom's age or even younger who are literally like, I had no options, like, or I didn't know what any of my options are because I never asked or no one ever gave me options and I just did what I was told. And which is, and maybe they had a perfectly fine birth, but maybe it could have been better and they didn't even have just the education and ability to advocate for themselves. So I think there is a lot of pressure to conform to traditional healthcare when you're having a baby. I've actually had to, so, and I don't know if I've shared this on the podcast, but I am planning to have a birth in the birth center, the new birth center that's opening in Salem in August. And I didn't even realize that that was going to be an option for me because I didn't think it'd be opening that soon. So I'm due at the end of October. So I'm really excited to have that as my main option. But I didn't realize in telling people that I would maybe get some responses that I don't need to have in my head, about just all the bad things that could happen, or, it's just a lot of fear based, or maybe people projecting their own experiences of birth onto an expecting mother, which is never helpful. So, what would you say to some maybe young moms or even soon to be moms that want to take a more non traditional path towards healthcare options as, just advice to give them?
Yeah, I think it's trust your intuition. Like if something doesn't like feel right, know that you can always change your plan. Like whether it is that you plan for an out of hospital birth and then something just doesn't feel right and you're like maybe I should like move towards the hospital or vice versa, or even changing providers or changing teams or changing hospital system. Like you always have these options, and like if your intuition's like really just like noping the situation, then it's okay to like lean into that and like look for other options, whether it's maybe it is like you need to add a doula to your team, maybe more last minute, maybe it is having your provider or your partner do some like more education. But I think it's really important to lean into your intuition and also like make sure that is an educated choice. I think a lot of people too hear like out of hospital birth and they assume it's like some lady shows up and like catches your baby, and they don't realize like these midwives, these out of hospital providers are incredibly educated. They have lots of training. They are fully qualified medical care providers that have training in emergency situations, and they also are experts in low risk births. So if something were to happen that would mean that you're not low risk anymore, they would make the appropriate transfers. It's also making sure you select the right provider for you. There's all sorts of people out there in hospitals, out of hospitals. And so making sure you have the right people on your team for you is super important, and making sure you feel safe and seen and supported with anyone on your team, no matter who it is, even if it's like your partner, like your life partner, they need to be on board too.
Yeah, it's funny you say just like trust your intuition, because that was my intuition from the beginning, was like I really just don't want a traditional medical birth, and that's my personal preference and choice, just because like nothing I do in my everyday life is by the books, well, probably by the books in general, but also especially in just how I approach my health and wellness. I've never been more of like a traditional medical. I don't just go to the hospital doctor. Like I've always sought out a natural path and, chiropractic and just good food and good exercise. Like that's my main source of well-being and taking care of myself. So to have my birth experience in a hospital just didn't feel right, because I don't spend any time in the hospital or at the doctor's office ever. So I think it was just that intuition and instinct that I think I want something different. And the biggest thing for me is having options. I am someone that needs a lot of options and I need choice. If I don't feel like I have choices, or that I get to make the choice, then I'm not a very happy person. So I think it is just intuition and knowing what's right for you, and just knowing that you have whatever options you need, and to not judge other people for their decisions either. I think that's the biggest thing is, we tend to just assume that everyone should have the same experience when it's never going to be the same at all, ever. And everyone's health is different. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I would say too, like you probably feel safest, out of hospital too. Like you might not feel safe in a hospital, and that's okay. Whereas other people are not going to feel safe outside of the hospital and they need to feel safe inside of it. And that's also okay. It's really up to you. It's your decision and you know what's best for you and your baby. And also if, like later down the line, you something happens or like your intuition shifts, like it's okay to honor those shifts too.
Yeah, that's actually really true. You're right. I don't feel safe in a hospital. And most people probably do, but I think because I don't spend any time there, I don't even have a primary doctor. Like, I literally never go to the doctor. Like, I don't have to unless it's like literally an emergency, like I broke a bone or something. So, I absolutely, yeah, you nailed it. I don't feel safe there. To me, it's like I go to the hospital when someone is sick or, something bad is happening. I think that's kind of what I've associated with any sort of hospital visit. So, yeah, I'd love to have you just kind of take us through what does it look like working with you, and we can kind of I can share even just my experience of starting with you and doing some of your programming, and then take us through that journey of like, okay, you found out you're pregnant. When would be the right time to get started working with you? And what does it look like from that point on and into postpartum too?
Yeah, so I have a few different like options. I have like the pelvic health side of things, which anyone can start anytime and do like rehabilitation or like return to exercise. But like when you're pregnant, I love to start working with people like right away because as you have seen in like those materials, like you have to make decisions right away, like in pregnancy. Like usually around 8 weeks you might be already like doing that first visit and like deciding who's on your birth team and like all of these things, like these decisions that need to be made. Providers, especially out of hospital, like book up, so figuring out who's going to be your team early is sometimes a necessity. So I really like to have people, even as soon as like 6 weeks, they can start working through material, and then we can always like jump into exercise stuff later if they're in need of support later, if they already have something they're doing that they like. I offer a couple different tracks. So I do like a more like, here's like a general template, like these workouts will check the boxes and keep you strong and healthy throughout your pregnancy. And then I do more customized too if people have like certain goals or like just certain preferences with that as well. We generally like work through that. And then towards like 28 to 30 weeks, we start working on more like birth prep, mobility, and things like that because it's really important that you are familiar with the positions that you might want to access during birth. Movement is a really good stress relief, pain relief, good way to cope during birth and labor. And so doing a lot of like mobility that is part of like a pelvic prep. We talk about perennial massage if that's something that people are wanting to do. Evidence here is kind of mixed on like what it does, but for most people, it at least exposes them to like the stretching that happens during birth. And so it can be a good thing to work on that breath. We work on breathing throughout. Um, we talk about postpartum in pregnancy because postpartum can be really, really hard. And so the better that we're prepared for it, hopefully the better it can go, or at least like we can be prepared if things aren't, what they should be and when we should seek more support. So lots of education around birth, lots of birth prep, letting you know your options, whether you're out of hospital, in hospital, things can change. And then two, once like birth has happened, I usually like people to like take about 6 weeks and do a little more like gentle program. Depends on what needs are here too. Like to work on breathing and like core connection and pelvic health connection right away. Really lean into like good nutrition habits here because that's super important for postpartum for helping you recover really well and hopefully a little, I want to say like faster, but like nutrition can definitely set you back. It won't
Mhm.
necessarily like catapult you ahead, but like it can definitely hold you back if you're not getting adequate nutrition. So lots of resources around that in postpartum. And then just walking people gradually back into exercise in postpartum. It really depends on what they want to be doing. I've had one client who wants to get back to CrossFit. So we did a really good 12-week strength kind of building, helping her get back to like more of those movements that you would see in CrossFit, worked with runners. And so again, same kind of thing. You should do like a more of a strength building and then gradually do like walk run and build them back into running again. It's very client driven in postpartum. It really depends on people's goals. And some people, their goals are like, I just want to be active again. I want to be able to like do things and not have any issues. helping them navigate any pelvic health concerns, because these are definitely where things tend to pop up, is in postpartum. They can pop up during pregnancy too, but postpartum, there's just so much healing that has to happen after birth, whether it's cesarean birth or vaginal birth.
Yeah. And let's talk a little bit about like what does the exercises look like? I will say a lot of the stretches or the yoga movements are things that I have done in the past. So that has been really helpful, I think, just for me having my own knowledge and background. So you've done yoga with me, pretty much most of what we would do in class is like really good birth prep for hip opening and just like relaxing pelvic floor and breathing. But I know one of the questions I had right away was like, should my workouts change because I'm pregnant now? Because I feel really good. Like, I feel like I've been able to pretty much continue everything that I've done. The only thing that's kind of dropped off at this point of almost 20 weeks is running. And I probably could try it again. But um, the last time I ran, my hips were really sore. So I've just kind of changed that out for other exercises. But I think there's a lot of, and even when I was teaching fitness and yoga, is always like, avoid this, avoid that, don't do this, don't do that. A lot of like almost negative language around what you shouldn't do. And I just feel like sometimes we treat pregnancy as like an illness, like you should avoid all of these things when I think I feel as good as I do right now because I've been so active.
100%. I think there's a lot of this negative language too, and a lot of it's based on like really flawed like research from like the 80s and 90s. I was just talking with someone yesterday, like there used to be an old limitation, like don't let your heart rate go above 140 when you're pregnant.
Mhm.
And that was like refuted in the early 2000s, but like we still hear it 20 some years later. Um, Things just take time to change too. And honestly, like your birth, like medical provider is not the expert on exercise. They have
Mhm.
not they don't have the background like that I do, right? That I've like dove into exercise science and like studied pelvic health and all these things. Like this, their job is to keep you safe, like medically, make sure you and baby are doing good. And
Yeah, and
so,
that kind of goes for all stages of wellness too, whether you're pregnant or not. They are not the expert on exercise. So keep that in mind when they tell you that you shouldn't do certain activities or should only do this or that. I used to always hear that you should just do yoga while you're pregnant. People would tell me that all the time. And I'm like, first of all, a lot of the yoga, like traditional yoga, is not actually that comfortable for pregnancy. And second of all, like I'm sure you'll say, you should still be strength training. You still need to get your heart rate up. Like all of those things are still very helpful for pregnancy.
definitely. And like I told you, like the biggest concerns, like the biggest no-nos for like exercise during pregnancy would be contact sports. So no MMA, no things that are like going to be like aggressive, like punches or hits to potentially your abdomen. You could probably still do a boxing class if you wanted, as long as you're not
Pick
getting
a
hit.
bag.
Like that'd be fine.
Yeah.
Um, I've People can run up until the day they give birth. I've had women deadlifting like 165 pounds until like 38 weeks. Like it's really, what do you enjoy and what like do you like? My bias is strength training because I just think it's so important to at least get two like resistance training sessions in per week for everyone,
Mm.
but especially during pregnancy because it is such a high energy demanding state that it's really hard to build muscle and maintain muscle, if we're not doing those kinds of activities. Um, so I'm always going to bias towards doing at least two strength sessions per week that are actually like progressive strength training. Um, how I always think about like programming too is kind of like a TP. So like we'll build up, up, up. Usually around second trimesters when people like still feel good. So we'll kind of peak there and then we'll kind of go down that pyramid until birth. And then in postpartum, it's the same thing again. We're building up and then it's more of a level off. But
Mm-hmm.
there is going to be a deconditioning process that happens with pregnancy, right? Your body is literally making another human. So it's going to happen, but it doesn't mean that it has to drop off as much as it would if you didn't do anything. Exercise is so strongly recommended now that if women that are pregnant are not exercising before pregnancy, it's encouraged that they actually start a program during, whether it's going for walks. Something is better for nothing, but we know exercise is so good for us. So it's recommended. Obviously, there's contraindications that sometimes happen, but for 95% of people, right, like you should be exercising during pregnancy.
Yeah, and I mean, I've always loved my own workouts, but I love them even more now because it really forces me to connect to my body even more than it ever has, and just like really check in with how I'm feeling, and it's a way for me to connect with my baby because like I'm doing this to not only take care of myself at this point, but to care for this baby that needs that movement too. It's good for them too. It's not even just good for us. And I found that when I don't work out, I feel worse, like in all forms. My body hurts more. My mood is not as good. And I don't sleep as well when I'm not moving. Like the more I move during the day, the better, deeper sleep I get at night. So I just think there's so many benefits to it. Plus, we're in the middle of summer right now, or going to be, and there's no better time to get outside and get some movement and activity. So I also love your approach to pregnancy with nutrition. You kind of mentioned it, how important it is in the postpartum period. It's also so important during pregnancy, which is, I find even harder because your cravings are just so weird. And like mine have kind of finally leveled off, but I still have a sweet tooth. But I'm eating healthier now and I'm cooking again, thankfully. But that is also something to take into account is like your protein intake and like, especially because we're in summer now and I've been drinking, more electrolyte drinks. And like, could you touch a little bit on just how important nutrition is for pregnancy as well as movement?
Yeah, 100%. A lot of women undereat protein. So that's usually like when I'm working with clients, like what we focus on the most, and then we kind of work in the other things if we need to. But especially in pregnancy, there used to be this like old um, thought, especially by like more traditional medical providers, that um, you shouldn't overeat protein because it'd be like bad for you and baby. But that's like really not true. There's no like proof of that. And so a lot of women are told to undereat protein by their birth providers that don't have that knowledge. And Lily Nichols, who's a registered dietitian, her books are amazing, like Real Food for Pregnancy and Real Food for Gestational Diabetes, and now Real Food for Fertility. But she's really interesting because she's very evidence based, and she's like, I just can't believe that women are being told to eat so little protein. For me, I really like to see clients eating at least 80 grams per day. My more ideal number is over 100, probably closer to like body weight in grams of protein. Obviously, this changes with pregnancy, so usually a little closer to like your pre-pregnancy body weight in protein. Um, but that's like the biggest macronutrient that I see people not eating enough of. It is so important for your cells. It's literally the building block of your cells. When you're making another human, you're making a lot of cells. So you need that protein to really fuel that. And then we need fats and carbs because they're big energy sources, and fats are really important for our hormones and things like that too. So just balancing everything out. I really like a balanced approach to like meals and snacks. And so, making sure you have a portion of protein at each meal, usually like 30-ish grams is good for a lot of people. Having a serving of veggies, like a good fistful or two of veggies, having like a fistful of carbs, and then, some fats in there somewhere too. Usually fats are easier to come by, especially if you're like roasting your veggies in oil and if you eat like a little bit fattier meat and things like that. Very important, just like have that balanced nutrition, and it usually does help with like how you're feeling too, because a lot of like that nausea is because of
Mhm.
fluctuations in your blood sugar levels. And so if you're eating more regularly, you're eating these balanced meals, it helps your blood sugar stay at happy levels.
Yeah, and one other thing I guess I had heard was like staying away from like deli meats or just like, the protein part of it, I think. Like, and one of my main sources of protein is like beef sticks. Like, I love beef sticks. And I don't know, I find that, yeah, the protein is huge for feeling good and feeling fueled. It fills you up more than I think a lot of carbs do too. And I've just had, yeah, beef sticks on hand. I typically eat like gluten dairy free, but I have had a lot of like cheese as well, because that's protein, and yogurt and things like that too. So I have found that I think just having a lot of those little snacky, I just stocked up on a bunch of like grab and go snacks, or I've been making almost like my own little mini charcuterie board is really helpful, because you can do like meats, some nuts for protein and fat, strawberries, like you can like basically make your own little, balanced meal on the go. So that's been really helpful for me. But I think it was just nice to hear. And I know you had mentioned it at the workshop, like how beef sticks are a good option. I'm like, oh, okay. And then I think I had asked Dr. Erica about it too, about like, oh, can I have like, there are times where like a sub sandwich just sounded really good, and like I wanted ham or turkey on it, and they tell you not to do that. And I think everything in moderation for the most part, as far as food goes, like you're probably fine.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest worry with those things is foodborne illness. Your chances of foodborne illness are substantially higher from like raw fruits and veggies than they are from like deli meats and those sort of things. Obviously, there's still risk, and so again, this is a decision for you to make for yourself, what you are comfortable with. Um, if you know that the deli meat and those things have been handled safely and not like left out at room temp and like things like that. Same with fruits and veggies, they should be well washed before you're consuming them, even if you're not pregnant.
Yeah, I was like, these are like just normal basic like food.
Fertile sex. But uh yeah, it's just like, what do you, again, this comes down to like knowing your options and what you feel safe and like supported in, because you might not feel comfortable eating deli meat if you're someone who's gotten like foodborne illness off deli meat
Mm-hmm.
before. But if you've always felt fine and like you know that you're picking good quality options and not getting it from like
Yes.
sketchy places, and making those decisions for yourself, like it's also like people are adults, like we're all grown up here, like you can make your own decisions. We're not children. It's
Yes.
yeah, I don't know. I think sometimes that autonomy is like taken away from people when you're pregnant. Like you're almost, like you said, it's treated like an illness. All of a sudden you can't make decisions for yourself anymore. It's like,
Yeah, because people kind of like give you a look like, oh, you're eating that? Like, yeah, I'm gonna be fine. And yeah, I think it comes down to like high quality, like you're going for quality foods almost more often than not anyways. Like even this morning I had a bunch of bacon, and it's like from bacon that we had literally from a local farmer who butchered a pig. Like picking options that are going to be overall better than just your random picks at the gas station or going somewhere kind of sketchy like you said. But I think it really is like that, kind of getting away from some of the fear mongering around pregnancy, and just like making decisions that are right for you, and fueling your body and moving your body and doing all those fun things. So let's talk a little bit about you personally, and tell us what do you currently enjoy the most about your business?
I mean, it's just so much fun to have like the flexibility there. I mean, I feel like I've been working more than ever, which is, sometimes like, huh. But it honestly, like, I just enjoy it so much. Like, I love being able to support women in this way. It's such a cool way to blend all of my skills in like one subset. And I feel like I can actually like help people with accountability and help people like follow through. And a big part of me leaving like in person care is that I just don't want people to rely on me. Like, I truly believe that people have the power within themselves to like help themselves and get themselves feeling better and getting them back to activities that they love. And I'm really there to like guide them, but I can't do the work for people either. Sometimes you wish you could, but that's also like giving people like that empowerment and the accountability for themselves too is super important to me. Um, it's just been really such a fun journey too, and I feel like there's more room sometimes for me to like learn more too and like dive more into things for people than there was like traditionally like in person, which has been really cool too. I feel like I can like help people this on such a deeper level in some ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can definitely relate to just feeling like you don't want to be that just like person people rely on to come and kind of fix them in a way, or like they won't do it unless you're there. because I felt that a little bit in my business too. And my biggest thing is, yeah, education and empowering other people to make those decisions for themselves, and providing the guidance and the resources like this podcast, or, sharing something online like, hey, this worked for me. And then giving people the autonomy to just try it out for themselves and see if it works for them, and knowing that not everyone is cookie cutter, which also keeps it really interesting and fun, because you get to work with all different types of people and different stages and experiences and all of those things. So I would love to know what has been like your biggest challenge, maybe as a business owner now that you are on your own.
I mean, something I feel like I've always like struggled with is just like some fear around like breaking outside of the traditional like I don't know, like workforce in a way. Like I think it's so much more accepted now, but like growing up, right, you're like told like you're going to college, you get your degree, and then you're like go work for someone else. And I think at least with like my parents who love them, but like they're super uncomfortable maybe with me like
Mm.
kind of going on my own and doing something more non-traditional, I guess, in a sense. I think it's helpful that my partner is also in the online space and like navigating his own business as well. So like they can see that it is possible to work non-traditional, but I think too like our generation just doesn't want the same things they did either, and maybe out of necessity to some degree too. But yeah, definitely my biggest challenge is kind of like stepping into that fear and like making decisions like not necessarily quickly, but like making the decisions and keeping moving is
Mhm.
definitely like a challenge, but it is a good thing for me too. I'm pretty like logical and realistic, and so sometimes like the dreaming part is hard for me, but like also like it's okay to have those dreams and like be afraid of them too. It doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. It's just those are big dreams. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I was going to say, I'm sure it does help that your partner is also creating his own business and doing, doing it outside of the traditional, yeah, going and working for someone else too, because it is very different if that is not like, yeah, the norm of what maybe you grew up with or what you're surrounded with, which hopefully just being part of Sister Circle has kind of normalized that experience for you, that like when you do run into challenges and roadblocks, they're not necessarily unique. Like everyone has same or similar challenges too.
Yeah, and I think too, especially like Sister Circle is so great because I think they're just everyone's so supportive. But like it's very like people like I still say I'm a chiropractor, but then people are like, "Oh, you're online," and like that's super weird to them because they think of chiropractic as like hands-on adjustments and
Mm-hmm.
manipulations. They don't think of it as like a profession. And so I think too, like having more connections now with other chiropractors that are in the online space doing similar things. I have a really good chiropractic friend who is all online helping people with hypermobility and EDS, and she's crushing it. And like, it's just so cool to see like we can leverage our degree in so many different ways too. And yes, it's scary to like not be seeing people in person in some ways, but also like it's just such a cool way to like use our license too.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like opening the door to other options than maybe what we're used to seeing for that role. So where, and this is kind of a large question, but where do you think that health and wellness industry is going? Like where are you going with what you're doing in the industry, and where do you see us headed?
So that is a large question. I really like again, like I think the social media in some ways is such a good thing because there's just like so much more education and like knowledge out there. Like more people know now to like ask for itemized bills, and like it's very clear that like their insurance system is not working for a lot of people. And I think social media is hopefully going to help, especially like-minded healthcare providers like me, like disrupt the system and focus more on getting people outcomes than trying to like please the insurance companies. Um, I'm connected with a group called the Honey Badger Project, and it's a whole bunch of healthcare providers, a lot of PTs, some chiropractors, some like fitness type industry people, all who like have stepped outside the traditional system and like want to do their own businesses and help move healthcare forward in different ways. Um, Hopefully be some of that change. But I just think there's obviously a lot of things that need to change to actually get people like good healthcare access and um, keep innovation happening. I'm definitely not the one to like fix this, right? But I can be part of the solution. And so that's like a big reason too that I like don't take insurance because I want to like be paid on like getting you the outcomes that you want, not necessarily, oh, I need to do, three three adjustments in these different areas to like get paid this amount,
Yeah. Yep.
That's not a great way to work and it's not really centering the client and the patient, right? Like that's not your necessarily like your goal of working together. So that's I guess for me just there needs to be some shifts there um for a healthcare system. And I think that's a good thing too. Like in this area, right, we have like neighborhood family clinics, we have
Mhm.
the midwives are working outside that system. Like I think that's a very good thing. A lot of healthcare providers don't want to be in that anymore either. Like they're
Yeah.
not benefiting either.
Yeah, I think that's what's interesting is there has been a lot of just like people realizing that maybe what they originally went into healthcare for is no longer what they're able to do. So how do I do that outside of this medical model? And I think we're going to see a lot more of just like the independent kind of either solopreneurs or people building those kind of alternative practices. I think what we have specifically in the Quilly region is a amazing start to what is going to become like even more of an explosion of, in pregnancy and outside of pregnancy, people just being more educated on their health and making those decisions that they need to that's best for them. So I think it's exciting. It's an exciting time to be part of the industry or even just like kind of part of the movement. I guess everyone can be part of that movement and just the decisions that we make every day. What we're choosing to do for ourselves, for our bodies, for our kids, for our families. So it really is like taking that personal responsibility to care about your health and do something about it. And I think this is just the beginning. We're going to start to see more and more people advocating for themselves, which is really cool.
Yeah, 100%. I think the change comes from like us, right? And knowing that we want something different and that we don't want to work inside certain systems. And it can be really hard and scary, but also like super rewarding and a good thing for the people that we want to serve, right? Like no one gets into healthcare, I think, to make a ton of money and run out of there. It's truly, I think a lot of them are, service minded and things like that too. Um, so hopefully we keep seeing good change. I think we will. I think that's somewhat the power of like social media too, is that people just are like, oh, we're learning these things and this is maybe not what's going to match well at this place. And what are my other options?
Yes. So what's next for you? What are some of those big dreams that scare you?
Yeah. I mean, we'll see. I just really want to keep growing my business right now, keep bringing on one-on-one clients and supporting birth workers in this area, or birth people, women giving birth in this area. Eventually, I really would like to get into more like educating other clinicians and things like that too. Um, Again, like I'm a very non-traditional chiropractor, so just really, letting students see there's other options, educating other people on like how you can do pelvic health as a chiropractor and things like that too. Um, so hopefully some more courses in my future course creation. Would like to create some courses for like birth education and things like that too. Eventually would probably like to be hybrid to some degree, back in person, but just different. Um,
Mm-hmm.
we'll see where that ends up. But and other like goals to eventually like get started in having a family and things like that too. And I think a big reason for me building my business right now is so that I have that flexibility and that freedom when we do have a family to also be very, very present with them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think you're doing it the right way because but you're putting in the work now. You just launched your business 5-6 months ago, and it takes a couple years to get that really like going consistently and have those systems and routines and consistency, and then you'll be ready for it when it all happens. So super excited for you. One of my favorite questions to ask is, what are you most proud of about yourself?
I'm just proud that I'm like taking the chances right now. Like I've always been, I think, just, very logistical and like realistic. And I think sometimes that can hold me back. But this has been like such a season of growth. And I'm really like proud of myself for like leaning into it and like stepping into it and keeping going, because it definitely is not all sunshine and rainbows, business ownership. And so just the fact that I like, keep moving and keep showing up, and I feel like I've been more like vulnerable about things than I've like ever been. I'm not like always like the most open person. I think this phase of life has really helped me like grow in those ways too.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. It is a scary season. So, way to embrace it and just, like you said, be vulnerable and lean into it. So, my final question is, what drives your soul today? What do you get up for each morning?
I think it's really what we already hit on. It's empowering other women to have choices in their healthcare, make the decisions that are best for them, and also like help them get back to movement they love and activities they love, whether it's finding new activities or continuing new ones. Like, I think that's really what fuels me. I just love movement so much. Um, and helping people have like better outcomes too and feel better about their choices and supporting women is just really what I guess keeps me going.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Well, thank you for joining us today, Ellyn. Tell us where to find you if we want to learn more.
Yeah, I have a website. It's dochalleysolutions.com. That has a ton of information on it. And then I also am very active on Instagram, put a lot of educational content out there. And that's ellynhalley.dc on Instagram too.
Awesome. Go follow her there. And until next time, keep following what drives your soul.